Hello friends! I suppose many of us often feel the urge to quit everything and just go to some secluded place in the mountains, where we can take a break from everyday problems and worries, and where no one can find us. Of course, many of us wouldn't last more than a couple of days living like this. But if I told you that there's one family that has lived in the mountains for centuries and none of its members have ever held money in their hands or even heard of television and don't even know words like the internet, plumbing, and electricity. And the most interesting part is that this family was discovered by accident. It all began a few years ago when two climbers, Haydar and Atish, were climbing Mount Hassan in Turkey and suddenly discovered a stone house on one of the gentler slopes. When they came closer to the house, they saw cows, sheep, and chickens, and most surprisingly, people. Having seen the uninvited guests, the inhabitants of the stone house immediately hid inside their shelter, and the climbers didn't dare to approach or try talking to the strange mountain people. However, Haydar and Atish were very curious. They wanted to know who they met in this remote and wild land. After all, the nearest village was a few days of walking away, and the map didn't show any other settlements around. Upon their return to the base camp, the climbers managed to find an old man who knew the Turkish dialect well. It was Gorkin Ganyul, and he was very surprised to hear the story of an unknown family living in the mountains. That same day, they made a decision to climb the mountain again, which took much longer this time because the old man repeatedly complained of fatigue. However, he was so curious about this family that he didn't give up. Later, having found that same slope, Gorkin ordered the tourists to stay put until he made contact with the residents of the mountain house. The man slowly approached the building, and as soon as he was noticed by the family, he began to speak in the dialect. After talking to Gorkin for a few minutes, the mountain dwellers calmed down a little as they realized that they were talking to someone local. So they told Gorkin their amazing story, which surprised him a lot. Hussein Tashar, the head of the family, was the only one who agreed to talk to the old man, and what he told surprised the climbers, and then the whole world. It turns out that his family history dates back to the 17th century, when Turkish nomads settled on one of the mountain plains. They built a small stone house and made a farm there. Their family has been living alone in this house ever since, inhabiting these remote mountainous regions. Many generations of incredible people were born in this stone house, and they were all buried there as well. Hussein is the main keeper of his family history and admits that he has lived there for 80 years. He was forced to leave his house only once when his parents asked him to find a wife to continue their family. The young man found a distant relative named Amin. By some miracle, the young woman quickly agreed to marry him and even go back to the mountains with him. Since then, the couple has had 10 children. 5 of them ran away 30 years ago. They chose to live in one of the Turkish cities, despite their parents' objections. Sadly, the parents never heard from them again. And the other 5 kids were still living in the stone house, and they're not planning on going anywhere. The youngest child is 28 years old, and the oldest one is 37. However, despite their age, none of them speak Turkish or know the benefits of civilization. No one in the house has ever attended school, and consequently, they can't read or write. It's very surprising, but even Hussein has no idea what country he lives in or what's happening in the world today. When the family sees planes that occasionally fly over the mountains, they consider them to be huge birds, and they can't seem to understand what a car is. After Hussein and Amin had children, they could only leave the house for a short time to go to the nearest settlement, which was at a distance of about a 3-day walk. That's what they did about 3 decades ago. Now, the head of the family sends his sons there every 6 months to exchange skins, milk, and meat for things they could use at home. But it's hard to call the nearest village civilization because it's inhabited by people whose lives don't differ much from that of the Tashar family. The man proudly told everyone that he owned several sheep, cows, and chickens, and that they had enough food for both eating and bartering. The living conditions in the stone house of the Tashar family would seem terrible to us, as they prepare food on an open fire, and drinking water can only be collected from the mountain river a few kilometers away. During winters, they have to melt snow, and again, there's no point in even talking about electricity or sewage. But technological progress found its way even to this remote location. Even though the family members don't have any documents and they've never been to a store, they've recently gotten a solar panel in the house. One day, Hussein dared to accept an offer of a resident of the near village. He traded a lot of meat and skins for a device he didn't even know how to use. But thanks to it, they now have electricity in 2 rooms of their house. It's also worth noting that the only way of trade they knew was bartering. They've always got everything they needed or wanted in exchange for something they had. So when the head of the family saw paper money, Gorkin Ganyul had to spend a lot of time explaining what it was and how it was used. The story of the forgotten family astonished the man so much that when he and the climbers returned back from the mountains, they decided to find Hussein's children and try to improve their family life a little. With the help of social media, the public, and the authorities, Hader and Atesh were able to track down the runaway children and even talk to them. It turned out that the siblings lived in civilization and they stayed in touch with each other. One of them even managed to get a college degree, but the others weren't any different from ordinary people in the big cities. 30 years later, Hussein's children made a joint decision to visit their parents and tell them of the world beyond their stone house. The head of the family was glad to see his children again, but even they couldn't convince him to move even to the nearby village. The man said he only had one house, and he was intent on living the rest of his life in it. Nevertheless, thanks to the efforts of his relatives, his documents were recovered, providing Hussein with the pension and 2 of his family's 5 children with disability benefits. But even so, the owner of the stone house is in no hurry to start enjoying the benefits of civilization or even spend this money. The Tashar family never dared to change their lives. But at the same time, their civilized children were able to improve, at least a little bit, the lives of their parents and their siblings who chose to stay at that old house. According to Mehmed Tasher, his parents now have a furnace, garden tools, and a large canister to collect rainfall. Such living conditions would definitely seem wild to us, but for the Tashar family, these things have become a great help and made their life much easier. Thanks to the efforts of the 2 climbers, the 5 children who fled to the city over 30 years ago now visit their parents regularly. So these men also helped reunite the Tashar family. However, the residents of the stone house still choose to stay in their childhood home and plan to live there for the rest of their lives. That's how their ancestors live. And that's how their children and grandchildren will live, because that's what they see as the meaning of their lives, and the problems of the city dwellers are of no interest to them. It's hard to believe, but members of this family have not left their home and have lived lost in time for over 300 years. And who knows, maybe it's for the best? The important thing is they're happy, and it's hard to ask for more. So friends, would you be able to live in a remote place, giving up all benefits of civilization? Make sure to comment below. And that's all for today. Rate our video if you liked it, and see you soon. Bye.